I was just speaking with our wonderful guest, and it's wonderful to see so many of you in the room, because I think I was just explaining that we were mildly terrified, I think, as a community when our Prime Minister started talking about the fact that it was never a greater time to be an Australian and how innovation was going to change everything, and all we heard was, oh my God, the robots are coming. And then we look back and think, well, yeah, in terms of transitioning a workforce, we've done this before. We used to call it workforce planning. We used to have a whole agency dedicated to workforce planning, but that was considered too Soviet after a while. And now we've got a whole bunch of people in organisations that deal with innovation. And it seems increasingly that amounts to the same thing. They're having the same thoughts that we used to have when we used to call it workforce planning. So we're in a fear-free zone with the robots here.
Yep.
Basically, we've invited Tancy Tan along. She's the Asia-Pacific Head of Robotics at JP Morgan. And what she's going to do for us today is calm us all down. She's going to share with us the journey that she's been on at JP Morgan about and how that journey started, the common use of robotics technology, what it tells us about how the world of work is changing, and how critically we can get value by adopting this technology. So we're going to start by giving her a very warm welcome.
Thank you.
And then my task is to ask you your first question, and you can put the answer in the technology. You could just show your hands, it'll be just as effective. But no, we have technology for this. Do you currently have a robot live in your organisation? This is on your app. You should be staring at your phone. There's way too much eye contact in this room.
Or do they want to put up their hands?
Do you want to just put up your hand? Let's just put up our hands. Okay, who has a robot live in your organisation? Yes? Hands up for yes. Live robots wandering around.
30%.
Okay.
Oh, you have a robot live in your organisation?
I'm just encouraging people to. Second question, no, but we're looking into it. Who's looking at getting a robot into their organisation? I was thinking of the coffee machine. I wonder what this means. And number 3, I have no idea. I'm not sure. What are you talking about? Where am I again? Who doesn't know? Go on. You don't know. All right. So what do you reckon? About a third?
A third, yeah. And I think out of the third, a lot of them seems to be JP Morgan people. So it's kind of not fair.
There we go. Well, I will leave you to your presentation. Once Tancy's finished her presentation, you have the opportunity to ask this highly educated, very experienced consultant any question you like, and I'll come up here and moderate it. Just out of interest, for those who use the machine, can we put that back on my thing? It was actually more. More were in the no, we don't. About 20%.
They were shy.
Yeah. Yes, 20%, 45% looking into it, and 36% I'm not sure what room they're in. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Ellen. All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tancy. I look after robotics and digitization in JP Morgan, covering the Asia-Pacific countries. So robotics as a technology has been around for years and years and years. I think for many of you who are familiar with other industry, you know that more than a decade ago, there are robots helping to perform surgery. So doctors, surgeons are using robots in surgery, and those patients usually recover much faster, and there's a higher success rate of a good surgery. So in those industries, robotics have been around for more than a decade. Just now, Ellen talked about lunch. I just want to share in New York, there are robots that are preparing pizzas, customizing it to the preference of the customer and delivering it to the clients. Over here at JP Morgan, we have over 1,000 bots live across all teams at JP Morgan, across all functions, business class, exec classes at JP Morgan. So out of the 1,000 bot, the question that everybody has is, what exactly are they doing at JP Morgan? So what exactly are the bots doing at JP Morgan? They are across all teams, all functions. Some of the robots are in human resource, for example. So for those students who are applying to JP Morgan, you are probably meeting the robot for the first time, having an interview process with the robot before you get to see a human. So robots are live in human resource. Robots are live in finance, preparing financial statements, preparing accounting statements for our client. Robots are also live in client services, providing real-time, round-the-clock coverage. So this is a very quick introduction of JP Morgan's journey, over 1,000 bots live. And out of 1,000 bought, half of them are in Asia Pacific. All right, I'll just get started. Robotics. The question that I get a lot is on the definition. When it comes to technology, everybody assumes about different definition when it comes to using technology terms. So I'll start off to baseline, what exactly is robotics? Robotics itself has got different definitions. Some people call it robotics process automation. That refers to a class of software that has got 3 different characteristics. So just sharing the first characteristics. So such software itself emulates human execution of repetitive process. So more than often when someone comes to work every day, there's bound to be some repetitive process, and such class of software attempts to emulate a human doing a repetitive process. So that's really the first definition of robotics software. Moving down to the second definition, which is an important one. Robotics is often viewed as a virtual workforce controlled by users. I'll spend some time to explain this concept. In traditional automation, when the users give the requirements to technology department, they almost forgot about the technicalities behind it. So you pass it on to your technology department, you go, guys, please automate that function for me, and I just want the result, I just want the output. But when it comes to adopting robotics technology, that is slightly different. The users need to be almost owning the bot, they need to be designing the bot, what is the bot supposed to do, where are the control process in the bot, and get it implemented. In fact, I was just speaking with Ellen, one of the future jobs of the future could just be bot operators. You know, all of us sitting around could just be operating different bots, which carries a variety of function. I think just a little bit on the virtual workforce. For the over 1,000 bots at JP Morgan, every bot has got an employee ID. So for those who are not aware, we give an employee ID to every single bot in JP Morgan. And what it means is that based on the employee ID, those bots are provisioned with the right access rights, systems access to perform out the task that the bot is supposed to do. And that is an important concept because robotics should be treated as a virtual workforce, which is an extended part of your team. Yeah, I can see some faces around feeling a little bit puzzled. I thought it's a machine, and why is JP Morgan treating robots as humans? So this virtual workforce is an important concept which I'll keep reiterating because what it also means is it is a paradigm shift for the whole workforce over here. So you need to almost treat the robot as part of the team and making sure that you take care of the robot and the robot shares the load of what the team is supposed to do. So that's the second concept of the virtual workforce. The third, the whole reason why the whole industry is so excited about robotics is because such software are really fungible. Many organizations, unfortunately, deals with multiple legacy systems. So you have got a mainframe system that doesn't talk to a browser system. And when different vendors try to sell you different technology, you know, they will tell you all the good things about the technology. And finally, when you bring it back to your organization, you just realize that the systems and the system doesn't talk to each other. And this is where robotics technology can help to alleviate some of this pain. So such software itself, this class of robotic software, they're pretty fungible. So the software itself enables different legacy systems to integrate together. So for example, as a knowledge worker, when I come to work every day, I probably deal with 3 different systems, maybe Outlook, you know, emails, shared drives. And this is where robotic software itself is just like a conductor of an orchestra that strings together all the different applications, systems in a very seamless fashion. And you can imagine the power of such technology because it enables you to conduct your day-to-day tasks pretty much mimicking what a human would do. Okay, so plenty of thoughts. So this is the third definition. So these are the 3 characteristics of robotic software. I think in the industry, some of you may be exposed to a lot of different vendors trying to sell different kind of robotic software. And in general, you'll find that these 3 characteristics really emulates what exactly is a robotic software. So moving on to the next slide. So the question that I get a lot from my clients is, Tancy, what exactly does the robotic software do? So I just want to keep reiterating that robotics itself is not a physical bot. It is nothing but a software that is performing the work of a knowledge worker. So what can the robot do? Data entry. I think that's pretty much self-explanatory. You take data prices from external website, external systems, punch it into your platform, and repeat the action over and over again. And this is something that the robotics software performs seamlessly, and it's very good at execution. Emails. I think a lot of us are probably drowning with tons of emails every day. So in JP Morgan here, we have implemented a lot of robots in our email management. So you may be asking, what are the robots doing when it comes to emails? So a lot of robots are helping us to send emails out to the clients. So for all our clients, different members with preference, specialized needs, instead of a human sending out different kind of emails, attaching the wrong files, maybe there's a little bit of breach over here, the robot performs such tasks seamlessly for us. So the robot helps people in JP Morgan, teams in JP Morgan, to send out emails to our client. At the same time, we are drowned with inbound emails. So we have got some bots with machine learning capabilities that checks our inbound emails. So these bots are running in our mailboxes. Based on all the emails that we received, the bot helps us to categorize the information, save the information on shared drive, or start processing. Some of these bots have got sentiment analysis. I think for those people who are familiar with this group of technology, sentiment analysis, so they can even predict the tone of those emails. So when a client responds and sends us an email, is it an angry email? Is it a happy email? And hence they prioritize the work accordingly. I think this is quite an interesting concept, especially for the super funds. You're looking a lot at your members' needs and preferences. And this is where having robots to differentiate that services and providing timely feedback is really crucial. So email management, and for those who have got interaction with JP Morgan, just be a bit suspicious when you get an email from us the next time. It could be a robot replying and not somebody that you know. Data aggregation. For those people who are familiar with the financial service industry, there is also another term for it. Some people call it the big data industry. In fact, our CEO, Jamie Dimon, always says that JP Morgan is a technology company with a banking license. So that is one of the common terms because we've got nothing but a lot of data, powerful data. So robotics is very good at data aggregation. When you prepare your client's financial statements, this is where the robotics software helps to pull together different sources of data, whether it's external, internal, different service provider, into a consolidated position for your members. So that's data aggregation. Robot itself performs cross-checking. For those in performing operations function, you're probably familiar with maker, checker. Highly sensitive functions often requires 2 levels of check. So why do you want to invest 2 people's time? So why don't you just put in a bot to do the maker, and a human does the final validation of the high-risk transaction? Reconciliation. I didn't come from a financial service industry, so I'm always puzzled at this function called reconciliation. So this is really where the data, because of data discrepancy, a lot of people are involved in ensuring that the data between the systems, the data between external sources and internal sources are in sync, and the data is accurate. So in JP Morgan here, we have put in a lot of bots to perform reconciliation. Some of these bots are not just helping to reconcile 2 pieces of data. We've also trained up the bot to be much more intelligent. So after the reconciliation process, for example, reconciling your cash positions, reconciling your bank statements, the robot has its own intelligence to automatically fix those discrepancies. And that is the beauty of robotics, because it is not just performing a task for you. The robot is helping you to fix the problems that we have seen previously. Yeah. And such robots are trained by loading 6 or 12 months worth of, say, reconciliation bricks. And this is where we've put in machine learning capabilities for the robot to understand the patterns of those bricks and what are the steps needed to fix those bricks going forward. And in some of the teams that we roll out robotics for reconciliation, they've seen productivity gone up by more than 50%. Because you can imagine time is being freed up because the robot takes over the task that humans previously performed endlessly. Decision making, the robots helps us to make certain decisions without bias. We just need to ensure that the rules are coded in a logical fashion. Lastly, digitization. A lot of robotics software comes with inbuilt what we call OCR technology that digitize hard copies. As much as JP Morgan aimed to be one of the most digital savvy companies around, unfortunately, we still receive a lot of hard copies every day from different clients, different members, simply because of regulatory reasons, or it can be preferences or just market practices. So in such cases, we will put in robotics to digitize the content of the inbound document. And once those content has been digitized, this is where we start the end-to-end processing in order to, for the robot to take over the task. So when you're evaluating robotic software, if you're interested in the OCR component, just make sure you test out the quality of the conversion. All right, this is some of the capabilities of robotics. Robotic software is one of those that you have to watch a video. If not, it's kind of hard to visualize what exactly is a robotic software. Maybe just a show of hands in this room, how many of you have seen a robotics video? Okay, about maybe 15%. Okay, so in the next 10 minutes, I'll switch over to a robotics video of 2 use cases. I think that will help you better understand this concept to internalize what exactly is robotics video. For those who are watching it for the first time, I just want to put a disclaimer, because watching robotics video can be quite a boring video, because essentially you're watching somebody to perform a task quite repetitively in an endless fashion. But that will give you a good understanding of the technology. So can we switch over to the first video? The first video here is a very simple task bot that is fetching prices from Google website. So this is a task that is typically done by somebody making investment decisions. At the start of the day, they will go to external website. Based on a portfolio of stocks they are interested in, they will download the prices to do their analysis. So now the video is running. The robot is working. So that's where the robot has gone to Google website, key in some of the stocks, download the historical prices, and download the spreadsheet and save it onto shared drive. So that's a very simple action of what the bot is doing, but this is something that traditional automation is unable to fulfill. And as a result, human time is spent every day. I see a lot of people nodding. Probably this is some of the tasks that you do every morning. And you can imagine the power of robotics, because if you have a robot set to run this task before you even come to office, the minute you step into the work, immediately you can use your brain to do more high value-added investment decisions. And this is pretty important because you don't want to spend your time on some mundane and repetitive task. So as we speak, the robot continues to run. It has successfully downloaded 4 different instruments, and it starts plotting the curves based on the historic prices. Very simple example. And for those, in case you think that the robot is disturbing your screen, you're watching your screen, most of the robotics that are rolled out in all organizations is hosted in the virtual server. So it doesn't interfere with the day-to-day working on your screen. It runs in the background. Almost you don't even sense that there is a robotics function in your team. So a very simple example of what we call a task bot that performs a repetitive task. And you can see that the power of this robot is it frees up the human time, so that you repurpose your time to put on more decision-making tasks. And that's one usage, very basic usage of robotics. I think just now we've got a show of hands where a lot of people have got, 30% has got bots in their organization. So you may be asking the question, my work is not, Tancy, my work is not a simple work. It is not repetitive. My work requires cognitive knowledge and experience. And this is something that a bot cannot replace. So I get that question all the time. My work cannot be replaced by a robot. My work is not repetitive. It is not structured. It requires experience. So this is where we moved on to the second video, where we show you an example of a bot that performs cognitive function. So the second video here, same thing is done by someone making investments. This is a task done by very experienced people looking at Australia Stock Exchange website. So the bot runs. It goes to the Australia Stock Exchange website every 1 hour to understand the latest news and announcements. This is a very common action for everybody to track news and announcements every day. So right now the robot has executed. It sees that there are 2 announcements for that moment. So XPE and NAB. There seem to be some announcements, but I don't know what exactly is that announcement. So the robot continues to run and extract the details of those announcements. So the robot proceeds to say, hey, let me save the PDF of that announcement. I'll open up the PDF, and I'll start to read and interpret the content. As all of us stares at the screen, the robot is actually making those interpretations in the background based on what we've trained the bot to do. So now the robot has digested the document. It is done with reading and interpreting that document, and the robot starts to save the document in the shared drive. And this is a task typically performed by experienced people reading and interpreting the content of the announcements. So now the bot is done, it has finished interpreting, and we continue to program the bot such that it continues the next action to inform some teams in JP Morgan that this is a consolidation of stock and they need to reflect the underlying holdings in the records, the books and records of the client. And as we speak, the robot continues to reiterate the loop and go through the second announcement. And if you notice that it was waiting for the screen to load, the robot, for those people implementing robotics, it doesn't mean that after robotics, your process will be much faster. Because if the underlying screen is slow, the robot will be slow. Because the robot needs to wait for the underlying screen to load. If your underlying system is slow, do not expect robotics to make it a miracle. Yeah? So this is a screen over here. Okay, as we speak, you realize that the format looks very different. So robotics is really not based on a structured document. You know, for the bot to have its own machine learning capabilities is really based on a data set. What kind of data can you extract out in order for the machine to be fed through for the algorithm to work? In this case, the bot has finished the second announcement. The bot seems a little bit unsure, yeah? The cursor is going everywhere. So in this case, it is a liquidation. And I'll inform some teams in Hong Kong to execute the liquidations of the underlying stock. And the task is done. And in this scenario, we will program the bot to send an email back to the owner of the bot to inform the owner that I finished reading, there were 2 corporate announcements for the day, so that the owner of the bot, which is the person who owns the bot, gets an update about the bot progressing and executing. So that's the idea behind robotics. The person who owns the bot needs to ensure that there is controls and checks along the way so that the bot doesn't run wild and you sort of know what the bot is running and how many jobs it has executed. Okay, with 2 videos, I hope everybody has got a good conceptual understanding of what exactly is robotics. We'll move on to some of the benefits of robotics. In JP Morgan, the bots are available round the clock, 24 hours. I was just speaking to some of our clients that currently our bot runs 6 days a week. The 7th day and the Sunday is server recalibration, but our aim is to make our robot run 24/7. And what it means to a lot of you right here is if you have robots supporting your members performing different functions, it's almost an round-the-clock availability for all kind of queries, for all kind of reporting, which is needed by the members. Reduction in costs. There is only so much that we can keep paying labor costs. Cost of labor is rising in all countries, whether it's Australia, whether it's the service delivery center, the cost of labor is rising. And there is a need to reduce those costs, and robotics is a great way for you to put in a machine to replace the cost of labor. Traceability. Traceability is an important concept why a lot of companies are using robotics, because when a human performs a certain step 1 to 10, it's almost quite hard for you to trace exactly which step of the process is taking the most time, where are the possible errors that could have occurred. But the whole process has been put on robotics. You get a very good audit trail of where time has been spent. And that is a good reason why a lot of organizations are using robotics, exactly for traceability and record purposes. Scalability. For volume growth, we can't keep hiring people in JP Morgan, for example. You know, we need to hire people, we need to train people, and training people takes time before they become productive. So this is where, for certain volume-sensitive functions, we have decided to put in robotics as a way to cope with the volume changes. So if the volume goes up by 2 times or 3 times, instead of hiring and training personnel, we have put in more and more bots in order to cope with the volume swing. So scalability is one of the important reasons why we put in robotics. Accuracy in transaction. The robot has no emotion. It doesn't have a bad day or a good day. So the robot either run or doesn't run. And that is a good thing because it doesn't result in manual error on a bad day. Timely delivery. For those in the industry who knows time is critical, we have got deadlines at the start of day, after market closing, end of day. There's different times of deadline throughout the day, which the team has to undergo. So for such time-sensitive function, in fact, in JP Morgan, we have put in a lot of robots. So the robots are triggered by the times that is been scheduled. And once the time has been scheduled, it will generate the task in order to meet the timely delivery. So for time-sensitive function, instead of a human performing the task, we have decided to put in robots. So robots are sending out reports to our clients round the clock. And in fact, when we first rolled out robots for such functions, we did not tell the clients that a robot is sending out reports to you. It is the client who noticed that, hey, JP Morgan, there is good timely delivery. I'm getting the reports on time every day, and it's always accurate. And in fact, many of them were really happy that they were not interacting with a human, but a robot on the other end. So timely delivery is something for you to consider, especially for your members who are looking for good information on a timely basis. Where traditional systems seems to have constraint, why not use robotics as a good alternative? Increase operational efficiency. So with robots coming in, the whole workforce gets much more efficient. There is no more manual processes. And what it means for you is that we can bring down the cost of running the funds. So you can make it cheaper and easier for your members because the whole cost of running down the fund is now being replaced by robot. Agile to changes. In JP Morgan, our bot's development time is anywhere between 6 to 8 weeks. So from idea conceptualization to delivery, 6 to 8 weeks is the turnaround time for robotics. And what it means to everybody is, if you're suddenly caught by a regulatory changes or sudden requirements that involve a quick turnaround time, and if your organization is not fast enough to react, you could use robotics as a good technology to react to those changes. In fact, in JP Morgan, I think our strategic systems always takes a long time to get enhancement. And in fact, the most horrible word you always hear from our technology partner is this word called prioritize. So Tancy, can you please prioritize this requirement? And those requirements goes on for 3 months, 6 months, probably a year. A lot of you are smiling because you probably face the same challenge. And those requirements never get automated. And this is where we have successfully put in robotics to cater to those requirements because robotics is able to change and react in a very fast manner. So agile to changes, try to think about this concept. If you need to respond to the ecosystem in a very fast manner, robotics is a very good technology for you to cope with those changes. Lastly, improve controls, no more manual processing, so there's no more manual errors as a result of that. We've seen videos, we've understood the definition, so just in summary, some of our common use cases. Robots are there to interpret documents. Those robots have got intelligence to make financial decisions. Robots are there to perform reconciliations, resolving the breaks. Robots are there for our legacy systems to work, to transfer data between systems to systems, uploading prices from external websites into JP Morgan systems, or uploading reports to regulatory websites. Enriching our data set, because we interact with our clients across different channels, whether it's email, electronic portal, or market utility. Sometimes the information could be found in different channels. So this is where robotics has been employed to assemble data from different channels to enrich the data set that we received. And lastly, to make sure that we customize our client needs, robots are there to react to those changes. So the question is, where can it go? I get a lot of questions, so Tancy, where can robotics go? If you look at JP Morgan's journey, on one end of simple robotics spectrum, I would say 80% of our bots belongs to what we call simple task bots or process automation. About 20% of those bots are so-called the complex bot, which are also known as virtual assistants. So a lot of you may be familiar with chatbots. I know many of the super funds have started or is starting to look at chatbots. So chatbot is another example of complicated bot, and some other examples includes bots with machine learning capabilities. So the Australia Stock Exchange example is what we have seen in terms of a machine learning bot. I think what it means for this group over here is where do I want to go? Like, some of my users says, hey, Tancy, I've given you a use case. I only want a machine learning bot. I don't want a simple bot. If you ask me, I think we have to be quite pragmatic. Whether it's a simple bot or whether it's a task bot, as long as it meets your business goals to automate the function, to create the kind of services and product, it doesn't matter whether it's a simple task bot or whether it's a machine learning bot. I think a lot of consultants will probably tell you all the wonderful benefits of robotics and how it can change the workforce. I think in our robotics journey here, there are some risks and challenges that we just want to highlight to this group. Risk and controls framework. In the robotics implementation of 6 to 8 weeks, we find that we spend more than 70% of our time in defining the risk and controls framework. Coding the bot is a very easy task. I think for those who are familiar with coding a bot can be done in a matter of 1 or 2 days. But it is the whole risk and governance behind robotics rollout that deserves a lot of attention. So, for example, when we say risk and controls, have you looked at what is the bot controls? At which point does the bot inform the owner that the task is completed? If your organization is rolling out robotics in a big bang, do you have a central inventory to know what are the bots running in the organization, what functions, and who controls those bots? So these are important questions to ask when designing the robotics strategy for your organization. What is the risk and control framework around robotics implementation? For those who are service provider implementing robotics, you may want to make sure that you have got a robust risk and control framework. I think for the trustee, it's probably a good question to ask your service provider. If you were to put in a robotics implementation, what are the controls that you want to have in place if your service provider is using a robot to talk to your members? Integration with strategic technology. So I've mentioned it very briefly. I get a complaint that Tancy, the robot is slow. The robot is even slower than a human after the implementation. And the reason is very simple, because if the underlying system that the robot is using is slow, the robot will be slow. So I just want to set expectation. It does not mean that things will become much faster after robotics. Definitely, you can tune the codes. But if the underlying legacy system is slow, the robot has waiting time. It will wait for the screen to react. If the screen is slow, if there is page error, the robot needs to respond accordingly. Which means that when you roll out robotics, it is important for you to have good dialogue with the underlying systems and technology. If the robot is using 5 different systems, if any of the one systems has got big changes, the robot needs to be upgraded to cope with that changes. So pretty much just like a human learning, if that system has got new changes, the human needs to be upgraded in order to learn with the system change. I think lastly, external connectivity. For those who have started your robotics journey, you have realized that most of the robots are connecting within systems in the organization. The main reason is because when you go to external website, when you often log in, this is my name, this is my password, the next question that you get is, are you a robot? Yeah, I think a lot of people are familiar with that. And this is where external systems just doesn't like robots logging on. They do not like robots logging on to external websites simply because of the fear of cybersecurity risk. I think they're just worried that the robot will run wild, this robot is going to come and grab my data, it's going to bring down my entire site. Those kind of fears are coming in with robotics. And as a result of that, that means that puts a limitation to how far we can stretch our use cases in robotics. But having said that, JP Morgan have successfully communicated to a lot of external parties. They understood the controls we have around robotics. And in fact, some of these external parties, including regulators, they have even given us and issued us a robotics ID. So I'm sure that, with the robotics ID, that's where we code for our robot to call the external systems. So with that dialogue coming up, I think slowly, this external connectivity challenges will become easier and easier. Because just like us, I think many of the organizations there are looking at employing robotics, because clearly they understand the strength and the power of such technology. I think I just want to ask the last question over here to this group. The question that I get a lot is, how many % of the future workforce will be made up of bots? I think that is a very common question that I always get. Is it 10 to 20%, 20 to 30, or more than 50%? Shall we just do an electronic polling? How many % of the future workforce will be made up of bots? Okay. Right, do we see some answers coming in? Oh, okay. Wow. Clearly, there's a lot of optimism that, it's, wow. Okay. So that's very good. I'll just wait for the two bars to keep rotating, 20 to 30% and more than 50%. Those are very interesting answers. In fact, I don't have the answer for you. The main reason why I don't have the answer for you is it all depends on how aggressive you want to roll out robotics for your organization. It is also one of the hottest topic. Between humans versus robot, how many % and how many ratio do I want it for my organization? For those organizations that are looking at robots for simple, repetitive tasks, maybe a good 20 to 30%. But if you want to invest in research and development to make the bot smarter, to make the bot have more machine learning capabilities, they can easily take over more than 50% of the workforce. I think in closing, I just want to say, we've gone through robotics definition. I hope you have understood a few use cases and how JP Morgan used robotics. I tell all my clients, robotics is actually not the future. Robotics is not the future because robotics is happening now. It is happening currently. Many organizations have seen advantages, benefits of such technology. So for those in the second category who are evaluating at the moment, my suggestion for you is please go aggressive. You don't need to prove the technology. It is a proven technology, and what you should do is to try to accelerate the adoption in your organization. So pretty much, this is JP Morgan's journey. All our managers, all our management are aggressive about this technology, simply because whether you're a super fund coming from a trustee or whether you are a service provider, you can easily use such technology to transform the way you provide services to your members in a cheaper, faster, and round-the-clock manner. So with that, I guess I'm ready to take any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tancy. Please thank Tancy for that presentation. That was absolutely brilliant. Very sad news has come through. Stephen Hawking has died. 76 years old. I think he was given a diagnosis that at the age of 21 he was expected to survive 2 years, and he survived 50. He thought a lot about artificial intelligence, and he thought that AI meant that robots can eventually outperform humans.
Yeah.
I was talking to a cardiac surgeon from India the other day, a revolutionary guy, an extraordinary fellow, does an amazing amount at one centre of cardiac surgery on children and adults, and provides a really fast feedback loop every day to the surgeons about what works and what doesn't. And he said to a room full of doctors who know best, a lot of them knew best, there are only 500,000 things that can go wrong with a human. 6,000 things that can go wrong, 500,000 symptoms and 100,000 tests. You're going to want the robot to give you a second opinion at least. And I'm wondering when you imagine the shift will occur from the 80% being task bots or simple bots in an assistance role to actually having enough learning to be able to go create algorithms or tease out data patterns to do really serious investing. What do you think?
It's a good question, because a lot of people ask me whether my job will be replaced by robots one day. But if you look at the course of human history, I think this is where we know that certain functions cannot be done by a robot. So things like research and development, things like creativity, these are all functions and jobs which cannot be replaced by a robot. For robotics to work with machine learning capabilities, maybe we'll go on to a little bit of technicalities. You need to feed the robot with data. You need to feed the robot with different parameters, different data, for the bot to become more and more intelligent. And this is where the human knowledge is required to understand those parameters and what are the data set that you need to feed the data to the bot. Yeah.
Even if you can't filter the data as quickly as the bot can eventually.
Yeah.
Let's go to some of the questions on the screen. automated answering options in call centres can really annoy people, you think? Thoughts on best practice here and if super funds should automate call answering?
I've gone through those frustrations. If you ask me, like, why is it frustrating? It's because you don't really understand the human behavior or the members' behavior. When automated call centers are being designed in a frustrating manner, it's because they look at it from a system perspective. Press 1, press 3, press 4, but it is because they don't really know how to use about that technology. If you really try to understand from a user perspective, you need to streamline the way what users think without pressing through the systems. So that's where, technology like natural language processing comes in, where you try to understand the human behavior, and based on what the human speaks, direct the human to the reply straight away. So typically, this kind of like 1, press 2, press 3 is a very old way of looking at technology.
And what about, excuse me, chatbots? I often get the feeling that the chatbot is figuring out how to think by chatting with me.
Yes.
Which is not the purpose of my interaction.
Yes, yes.
What do you think? What's your view on chatbots?
Chatbots, yeah. I was testing out and speaking with some clients about their chatbot. I would say that chatbot is in very infancy stage right now. I think if you look at chatbot more than often, just like what you said, the chatbot is trying to figure out you and giving you different options, option 1, 2, and 3. That is because those chatbots have not reached a level of sophistication when it comes to the natural language processing. And for example, I just quote you one example. There is a bank in Singapore. The CEO was testing out the chatbot. So the CEO is called David Gladhill. So he asked his own chatbot, "Hi, who is David? Who is David Gladhill?" And the chatbot has no reply. The chatbot doesn't know who's David Gladhill, but guess what? The chatbot has got its own self-learning capability.
Okay.
So for today, he doesn't know who is David Gladhill. The chatbot tomorrow, if you ask again, the chatbot instantaneously reply. So which means that if you look at the whole spirit behind chatbot, it's not about what the chatbot can answer right now, it's about the chatbot having self-learning capabilities going forward. So if I cannot answer the question today, I need to know the answers tomorrow.
But isn't that just like having a whole bunch of interns wandering around the whole time going, eventually I'll be your boss? Yeah. Right now you just...
I think that's what all our interns tell us, yeah? They want to take over our position one day.
Always be polite to them.
Yeah.
What sort of people do we need to be hiring to capitalise on AI?
It's a great question. I'm actually not from technology department, so for those people who are wondering, I'm from a business, I'm from the user's perspective. So what sort of people do we need to hire to capitalize on AI? So definitely from a technology perspective, you need data scientists. You need data scientists to look at the data, to look at the algorithm behind it. But I think what is important for this group is to really understand the potential of the technology. It's really not about bright, shiny toys, but it's about knowing your business, your clients' needs, and how can you apply such technology to get the advantage. It doesn't mean that everybody needs to get a chatbot. It doesn't mean that everybody needs to get a taskbot or a machine bot. So you need to understand the power of and limitations of each technology and apply your use cases appropriately.
And what about this one? What capabilities do organisations need to have internally to bring bots in at scale?
It's a great question, great question. I've been meeting a lot of clients and everybody tells me, yes, we have started our robotics journey, but the challenge here is we're not able to scale it up. We're not able to scale it up and we're just stopping at maybe a handful of bots. For robotics to really fly, just sharing some of the things that we do at JP Morgan, it needs to be almost a cultural change. At the top of the house, leaders should be living and breathing with bots. And when you roll out robotics, the message to the guys on the ground is, guys, it's not to replace your job. It is to free up your time. It is to automate tasks. So I think one of the important aspects is robotics is here to automate tasks. It does not automate your job. And if you send that positive message across, you realize that it creates a different kind of dimension to that. And when everybody starts to open up and unleash their fears of robotics, you realize that this is actually quite a fun technology. Because unlike those boring technology, this is the case where users are in the driver's seat. I drive robotics, I design my bot, I want my bot to perform such and such function.
And so when you come to the question of artificial intelligence, I always wonder, whose intelligence? Is it the intelligence of a white Anglo nerd sitting in a basement in, Silicon Valley? Is that the artificial intelligence? Is that the normal? Or whose intelligence are we getting? Because if we're going to replicate it endlessly, don't we need to have a think about how do we harness human intelligence?
Yeah. I think it's a great question. I think it's the intelligence of the data. It's, of course, the intelligence of the algorithm reading the data. So I've seen many cases where the bots are rolling out and performing incorrectly. It's because the data behind it is not correct. The data is not accurate. It sort of needs a bit of data cleansing. As a result, that intelligence level dropped. So artificial intelligence or machine learning bots are data hungry. So they need to feed a lot of data in order for it to be more and more intelligent.
And there's not a particularly human type of way that they think.
It is not. It's an algorithm thinking, yeah. So garbage in, garbage out. If the data is, if the data is not clean, the bot won't be intelligent.
Are robots at risk of hackers based on accessing the internet to complete tasks?
I got that question a lot when I tried to get approvals for external website. I would say the answer is no. When a robot accesses an external internet versus a human accessing the external internet, in fact, I would think that the human is susceptible to higher risk of cybersecurity, because the boundaries of cybersecurity controls is the same, whether it's an employee ID or whether it's a robot ID, it's exactly the same cybersecurity controls. But a human may be subjected to, phishing risks, you may give out your password accidentally, but a robot password is actually kept in a very safe vault. For those people who have got robotics implementation, no one sees the password of the bot. The password is kept in a very safe virtual vault, and each time the robot runs, it goes to the vault to get the password and returns and performs the job.
So it's kind of like driverless cars. In a way, statistically, they're safer than having humans make a bunch of decisions.
That is correct, yeah.
And finally, you're saying that there's this message, don't worry, it's just the repetitive tasks. But what about the people whose job it is to do the repetitive tasks, right? So what responsibility do organisations have in upskilling the staff whose job may be lost to automation?
Yeah. In fact, if you ask those people who are doing the repetitive tasks, I think they're sick and tired. They come in, everybody comes in very driven for the day. They want to learn new things, they want to create new products, new services. They're sick and tired of the standard business as usual tasks that they need to do. So it would be great that the robot performs those tasks. They free up their time to learn some other new product, new services, and just get repurposed. Because if you look at robotics and digitization, a lot of people view the current time as the next industrial revolution. I think we covered that this morning. It is viewed as the next industrial revolution. And what it means is that everybody just needs to move along. There will be new jobs created. Once your time is free up, maybe you want to take on new skills, be a data scientist, be a bot operator, designing the bot, implementing those changes. Because fundamentally, if you know your business, if you know your client, if you know your product, it really doesn't matter whether it's a robotics technology or, virtual technology or some other kind of technology, because the fundamentals remains.
Isn't that a wonderful session? Please thank Tancy Tan. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
I really thought that was great. We have a speaker gift, which is a donation to the First Nations Foundation, and afternoon tea will now take place in CMSF Central, proudly supported by our premium partner, Insight Investment. Thank you.